Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to episode 96 of the Social Media and Politics podcast, bringing you expert insights into how social media is changing the political game. I'm your host, Michael Becerra, political scientist at Lund University. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at SMNP Podcast or visit us on the web at socialmediaandpolitics.org. All right, y'all, thanks so much for tuning in. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you've probably heard us talk about internet boards like the Donald subreddit, 4chan, 8chan. We've been covering a lot of meme activity recently. And part of the reason for that is I read a lot about these topics in the news, but I miss a more in-depth understanding about what's happening on these fora and why do people spend so much time and effort engaging with them. So I was going through some of my email newsletters last week, and I saw some headlines about a quote-unquote new pro-Trump social network, which I thought would be an interesting topic to cover on the show. And after doing a bit of research, it turns out there is a new website called TheDonald.win, which is essentially an initiative started by some moderators from the Donald subreddit to create a new website that gets around some of the restrictions placed on the Donald subreddit by the Reddit platform itself. So I reached out to the moderators at the news site, TheDonald.win, or as it's known, .win, and set up an interview. So in this episode, we're going to dive into what it's like to be a moderator for the Donald subreddit, how those practices have changed over time, and what are some of the motivations behind creating a new website for this community that in its first week had over 70,000 people sign up. So a really interesting interview. We're going to get into red pilling and memes and what makes a good meme in terms of how these online fora see it. So obviously some controversial topics. I don't have a name or identity for the guest. He simply goes by Steve. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Steve. He is a moderator for the Donald subreddit and one of the creators of the new website, TheDonald.win. Steve, thanks for taking the time out and welcome to the Social Media and Politics podcast.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So before we dive into the launch of the Donald.win and kind of discuss a bit about that, I'd like to talk about the Donald subreddit and your experiences as a mod there. So can you describe how you got involved moderating the Donald and what the subreddit was like back during the 2016 election?
Yeah, it was late 2015. I think I got involved before the politics, or before Trump's election, actually. I didn't really think the president mattered at all. At one point, he trolled Jeb Bush by buying his domain and linking it back to DonaldJTrump.com. At that point, I went onto his website and thought it was funny. Figured I'd vote for the guy as a joke. When I started looking at his issues, saw that he was, talking about China and actually talking about immigration and stuff that mattered that nobody else seemed to talk about. So I kind of fell head over heels. So I found the Donald subreddit in its early days and got really active on there. Had a lot of popular posts and whatnot, and reported a lot of, Bernie bots and whatnot, and just kind of took notice, got to know the moderators, joined the team, I think early 2016, which is not how we do it nowadays. Nowadays, to become a mod, we do temp teams to kind of find good users, vet them, see if they're doing all right. It's a lot more of a structured process, which everything's a lot more structured than it was back in the day. It was a lot more free. It was kind of 4chan light, to be honest. The counterculture, which nowadays the counterculture is being a good person, it seems, taking care of a family. Yeah, it was a lot more wild. We actually had a trolling war with the Sweden subreddit at one point. That was fun. We're not allowed to do things like that anymore. But going through the primaries in 2016 was just the most fun thing in the world. And then later into Bernie and Hillary, because we kind of had a laser focus, targets to make fun of, people that were absolutely ripe to meme. And that's kind of gone away lately just because there's, so many moving targets and no direct enemies. Kind of gone from attack to defense. But I'd say going into the next election, we'll kind of refocus and memes will occur a lot more.
Yeah, I've got a ton of questions for you, but being based here in Sweden, I have to ask about that. Was that in relation to the last night in Sweden comment?
No, that was before that. I believe that was after he was president, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
No, that was kind of during the the every other day terrorist attacks that seemed to have stopped when Trump got elected, strangely enough. All the immigration, there was the Malmo was a huge issue. So we just kind of poked fun at that. And then their response was always, well, we have healthcare, and back and forth until it just kind of died down, I guess.
Huh, interesting. As I'm in Malmo right now.
Oh,
But
nice.
anyways, you mentioned the sort of meme making a bit. But I mean, it seems that that's always kind of been connected to the Donald. Has it always been kind of focused on the memes as the main kind of, I guess, glue of the community?
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of what brings everybody together. Come for the memes, stay for the articles. Like I said, lately we've been more on the defense and it's been a little more serious. So there have been fewer memes, more articles. I'd like to see that change going into the next elections, but people have kind of gotten more serious and want to stay informed. Ideally, with the news site, we'll be able to handle that a little better. But yeah, as it stands, it has its roots in just kind of meme culture, I guess, if that's a thing.
Gotcha. And I want to come back to that, but kind of sticking in these earlier days, I guess when it was in attack mode, what was it like being a moderator for that subreddit? I mean, how do you first become one? And then what are the kind of day-to-day tasks like?
Oh, yeah, talked before about first becoming one. I just was super active and really good at making memes, and now I don't have time for that anymore because I mod. Uh, Back then, it was pretty much entirely just, if you see a commie, you get rid of them. And there were tons and tons and tons of leftists and, the Bernie supporters and like 6 Hillary supporters. There were never really any of those that were real. Back then, it was just, going through a mod queue of reported posts and getting rid of those people, sticking good memes and whatnot. We usually try to rotate about once an hour. Nowadays, it's more censoring our own users to match Reddit's ridiculous standards. We don't even get too many trolls nowadays. It's just deleting comments because you can't say that on Reddit anymore. So it's not as fun anymore. Plus, I can't really moderate because the admins took away all of my permissions to do so. So I just kind of run the ship.
Right. And that's sort of a reason for the new site, right?
Yeah, one of many. The biggest reason, second reason, obviously, they can ban us at any point, and then we don't really have a place to meet up.
Gotcha. And kind of sticking on these moderators, at least for the subreddit, I mean, what's their kind of typical profile? Do they tend to be politically active? Do they have a history of being active? Or, are they brought in because they're good memers or because they have experience in moderating other subreddits? Like, who are these moderators?
It is really all across the board. Nowadays, like I said, we do the temp team. So we started one yesterday. We put out an ad, asked people to fill it out. We'll look at their profile, see, how active they are and whatnot. There are only 1 or 2 people that are still left from before that. But they come in all stripes. We've got military guys. We've got, high level, actually a couple executives. And we've got manual laborers, teachers. As far as the type of person, there's not really one that you could pin down. And as far as political experience, we've got people that never even turned on the news before Trump started and then kind of got hooked. We've got people that work in Washington. Probably shouldn't say that. We've got Kremlin members. But yeah, there's no one kind of person that seems to be interested in modding Donald. Some people just made a lot of memes and wanted to stick around and help out more. Some people were more serious, and I guess the only common bond is they wanted to do more than they could as just a user in helping the Donald and whatever our mission is.
Gotcha. And from kind of reading a bit on the different forums before this interview, I realized that a lot of the mods have, they're kind of known within the subreddit by their different screen names or handles or whatever you like to call them. And so I'm wondering, like, I know that there's kind of a back channel communication on Discord for the different moderators. Do you kind of keep it more or less anonymous by the screen names, or do you actually get into sharing more personal information about who people are?
For the most part, and it's sad that, some of us have been doing this for years at this point, that in today's culture, you really can't trust giving away your identity, even to people that you feel like you know very well. So for the most part, it is totally anonymous. There are, a number of people that have met up or at least, send another mod something for Christmas, et cetera, et cetera. But
Hmm.
most people don't know other people's information. I actually got doxxed from a former mod, I believe, a few years ago, but it stayed pretty well under wraps.
Interesting. And kind of keeping on this idea of the communication that the mods have amongst themselves, they also have communication with liaisons or representatives from Reddit. So can you describe a bit what the conversation or the type of interaction with the representatives from Reddit themselves is like?
I can't tell you anything nowadays because they stopped talking to us about 2 years ago. But before that, it was mostly them coming in to excoriate us for breaking rules that don't actually exist. And then I generally would yell at them and show them 1,000 examples from other subreddits breaking the exact rules that they just made up on the fly. And it really just came to a stalemate until they just kind of stopped logging on.
Because let's turn over to the news site, TheDonald.win, where one of the sort of, I guess, introductory posts, or one that I think is still stickied up there, kind of explains the rationale for the site and answers some of the FAQs behind why it was developed. And that post outlines a kind of slow censorship by Reddit, starting with being banned from other parts of the site, like /all, and then these things like algorithm changes, downvote bots, and then this quarantine that's quite notorious in the Donald subreddit. So could you walk us through that process and the types of steps the platform took to effectively try and contain the Donald?
Yeah, I guess backstory to that is our use of stickies that you mentioned earlier. It's always been the culture of the board, which is not generally how subreddits use it, but any breaking news, any particularly, spicy meme we see or anything, we'll sticky up for an hour or so just to get eyes on it and gets attention. So even back as far as when the Donald was, 20,000 subscribers, we were making the front page at any given time. 3 or 4 of the posts you'd see on the front page was us. And that was apparently unacceptable. So the original change they made, which was right after Trump got elected, I can't imagine that was a motivation or anything, was that they restricted our stickies from reaching all, but also if we used sticky posts, they wouldn't reach all. So we came to a point where either we ignored what our community liked and stopped doing stickies, or got attention from all. And at the end of the day, we're here for the community. We're not here for a bunch of communists on Reddit. So we continued doing stickies, and that effectively removed us from all unless we decided to do a day where we didn't do stickies. But besides the point. So that was their soft hand of doing it. And in the process of doing that, they screwed up and made all of Reddit TheDonald for a day. That was fun.
Wait, how does that work?
Reddit programmers are just terrible at their job, and every time they try to make a site update, they screw it up. So in trying to censor us, somehow they set it so that r/all, which is the front page, was just the Donald. Everybody.
Did you notice any kind of spike in activity from that, or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It went up to 2 million views in an hour.
And so what about these kind of more like automated measures? Like you mentioned the Bernie bots before. I'm assuming that's not coming from Reddit themselves, but what about these kind of I guess more algorithmic changes that eventually kind of capped off with the quarantine?
Yeah, when I say Bernie bots, I just mean Bernie bros.
Okay.
But as far as they've hit with downvote bots, and I'd like to think that these aren't coming from Reddit themselves because, again, I don't know if they're good enough to program that. But they certainly never did much to mitigate the fact that, a post could get 100 upvotes, but it would at the same time get 100 downvotes, and it would always keep measured at 0 just to keep us. So downvote bots was one thing. They did at some point change our all to our popular, which just entirely eliminated us from the front page because we weren't apparently popular despite being the 3rd largest subreddit at the time. Mass reporting comments and posts. The way we mod is that users report posts or comments that violate the rules or should be removed. So you'll get people that use a bot that'll, mass report 1,000 things. And in that 1,000 things, they can have another account that posts something hateful, something violent, etc. And there's a good chance that it'll just get, randomly approved because we're trying to get rid of 1,000 fake reports. And Very rarely have we had any luck with Reddit helping with that.
Hmm. Interesting. So I can imagine, these kind of throw off the maybe normal functioning of the community, or perhaps how the community would like to function. At what point did you decide to start building this news site? Was there a particular moment that kind of kicked off the launch of this .win website?
Yeah, we considered doing it for literally years because Reddit's a terrible website. But the quarantine was when I finally told the programmers on my team, "Hey, let's go ahead and just start programming, get something ready, because we're at very least going to get the boot at some point." And that was at this point probably 6 months ago. Yeah, I believe it took about 6 months to create and beta test. But yeah, the quarantine, because no subreddits ever escape from quarantine, and they tend to just get banned. So that was the writing on the wall that we needed to get ourselves in gear and have a backup plan.
And the quarantine does what exactly? I mean, I know if you try to go to the Donald, you have to click an extra, I approve going into this subreddit. But I mean, does it have any other effect than that?
Yeah, it's a multi-stage effect. For one, it tells anybody that's never been there or isn't familiar with Reddit that we're an evil, hateful place and you should turn away. Two, a large chunk of our users are mobile users, and I've gotten thousands of complaints of people that can't access from mobile, particularly if they use a third-party app, which a number of ours do, because it doesn't present you with the quarantine thing to click, so you're just never able to get to it. And that especially in the beginning, that cut a large chunk of traffic. You can't search for us via Reddit. I believe up until recently, you couldn't search for us via Google. Because just as an aside, they had stripped us from their Google search, but there was a congressional hearing, and the next day we suddenly reappeared, which seemed odd. But yeah, it just makes it hard to find us, makes it hard to gain new subscribers, and we're quarantined from all, and we look dangerous. Plus, I believe it's probably a deterrent from getting good AMAs because you get a congressman that logs into a site and immediately gets told, "Hey, these people hate cops," which was their official reasoning, which was untrue. It's not a good look.
And have you been able to kind of quantify or see the effects of that quarantine on either new subscribers or the number of posts per day?
Oh yeah, our subscriber numbers, new subscribers went down from 4 or 5,000 a day to maybe 100 since the quarantine. Activities down. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but not as much as you would think. It's still a very active subreddit. But yeah, it's outside of using the Twitter and the occasional mention of news and whatnot, it makes growth significantly more difficult, which seems like an ethics violation, but whatever.
So then you build this new site. What's the goal behind it? I mean, if you look at the site, it looks very much like Reddit. And I guess it has some custom CSS code with the large Donald upvote that I guess mimics how it used to look back in the day. So kind of what's the motivation behind this new site?
The upfront motivation is as a backup in case they do pull the trigger and ban us. We already got the name out there. People have a bookmark. They can get there. But beyond that, like I said, modding used to be fun because it was just getting rid of leftists. Nowadays, just the subreddit itself kind of makes me angry because I see all the back end of how much we have to censor. Today, for example, the admins removed a comment from somebody who said they wanted to throw their shoe at Mark Ruffalo. That's the kind of thing that we have to censor because it's violence, saying that you want to throw a shoe. So that you can't say that you believe in the Second Amendment and using it in the chance that the government becomes a tyranny. It's stifled the free speech. It's stifled the memes because you can't really make anything edgy anymore, and that's the stuff that gets shared. So a big motivator for the .win site is just kind of bringing the Donald back to before Reddit tried to kill it by death of a thousand cuts.
And I mean, I guess the reason you would mod these type of, as you said, like throwing the shoe at somebody is just to be able to stay on Reddit. Is that right?
Exactly, because before the .win, it was the only place we had to go.
Gotcha. So I was reading, I mean, I guess this kind of caused some controversy with, splitting the community or infighting between the mods. I don't know the whole backstory, but I was reading that some of the old mods on the Donald subreddit were posting about, this is a plan to monetize a new site and perhaps turn over data to the campaign. I mean, is monetization part of the reason behind the new site?
No. Without getting into too much drama, no monetization. My programmers say that we can run the site ridiculously cheap. And I don't know if you're familiar with maga.image or magaimage. The image hosting site.
Mm.
It's significantly more expensive to run than the Donald would ever be. And we've run that out of our own pockets for, I guess, 2 years now. The reason for those rumors is that historically it's been easy to get rid of mods that have monetized or tried to make a buck off the sub. So they figured that was their quickest way to spread rumors. I've been approached by hundreds, if not thousands, of people that have offered to, or begged really, not even offered, to give us donations. I've had a few right-wing websites and products want to advertise. We've turned them all down. If we wanted to be making money, we could be making a ton of money. We don't want to be making money. It's not the point of it. This is for the future of the country. It actually angers me a bit to hear that something that we've all been doing for years for free, that's cost us tens of thousands of dollars of our lives, suddenly we want to make a buck off of it.
Right. Well, that's just what kind of was floating around there, you know. But looking at the design of .win, I mean, it's clearly modeled from Reddit. And I guess if you're programming the site from scratch, you can sort of design it any way you like. You can add features that you'd like. And so what were the design elements that you and the other mods wanted to build into the site? And kind of what's the reason behind them?
The ideology behind having it as fairly similar to Reddit as it stands was essentially for an easy transition and people lack of confusion. There are a number of things that we will implement. We would have implemented sooner, but we were kind of forced into a launch while we were still in beta. One, I kind of hinted on it earlier, was forcing everybody in the post to tag their post as, you know, a meme, a news article, a text post, just a thought or whatever, or a tweet. And as you're browsing at the top of your bar, be able to filter, you know, I just feel like chuckling at some pictures right now, or I'm interested in the news. That way it could create a dynamic front page that is more tailored to you. Another plan that we've been speaking about a lot today is enhanced sharing features, sharing to other forms of social media, and possibly points, ranks, titles for the kind of engagement you get offsite. That's really the bread and the butter of the Donald, is Facebook views and whatnot. That's where you get to people you actually know. But yeah, there's a number of small things, possibly separate, more private forums. We haven't really begun on that. But yeah, it is a nice change to be able to hear people's suggestions and come up with our own ideas and just do them, rather than wait 2 years for Reddit to try to make a change and then mess it up.
So do you mean like kind of a gamification engine that would sort of, people would level up or gain badges based on the exposure that their content gets outside of the website?
Yeah, and that's a pre-idea at best. I'm not familiar with the technology enough to know if we could. I assume we could see the views that people bring in, or just the amount that they share. But yeah, something like that.
Interesting. And do you have an idea about how many people have signed up? I know that there is a post for that people can upvote, but there's been some speculation that maybe it's been overly downvoted as well. Do you have any idea about how many people have actually created accounts for the site?
The initial week, we had, I believe, about 70,000 signups.
That many?
Yeah, and traffic's gone a little bit down since the initial launch, mostly because we haven't really been pushing it, and you know, that's how launches work. But if I were to speculate, I would probably ballpark it at around 120.
Interesting. So I want to get to this idea of sticky posts, which are ones that kind of, you know, stay up at the top of the kind of front page of the site. You know, how do you decide what is going to be stickied, especially on the news site?
It's really a grab bag. Obviously, if a major news article hits, you know, or even impeachment stuff, I won't dignify that as a major news article, or, you know, a terrorist attack or shooting or something, that we immediately go to new and look for somebody to post it and sticky that up. Aside from that, we just we try to keep about a 1 hour rotation. We've been slacking on that on .win because we're currently understaffed. But just, stuff that sticks out, good memes, good articles. I try to stick more to memes, possibly to a fault, but yeah, just anything that looks like it would be interesting to people and generate conversation.
Gotcha. And I want to turn to this idea of memes because, on the one hand, these kind of pro-Trump forums are for sharing news, sharing memes, but they also have this kind of stated intent of red pilling normies. And can you describe briefly what red pilling is and kind of how memes can be an effective tool to accomplish that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it obviously comes from when Morpheus gives Neo the red pill, and suddenly he sees the truth of the world. He wakes out of his illusion. It's a lot of people, particularly conservatives, they will come to a point in their lives where something that they've always regarded as just fact, they see incontrovertible evidence against it, and they wonder why they've been told that that's the case their entire life and it was a lie. That's kind of the first red pill. Like, Epstein didn't kill himself. And why are all these people tied to Epstein? And why doesn't that was a big one, Epstein. But once you've kind of taken that red pill, a lot of people are inclined to go look at what else they think they've been lied at their entire life. And that's, to continue the analogy, I guess, leaving the matrix. And it's kind of hard to go back to not caring after that. And as far as, memes for that, I think it's the perfect vehicle because the quickest way to engage with somebody, particularly on the internet, is just through humor, which is the point of memes. I've always said that our entire motto should be more fun than the other guy, because the fun person, you want to be the fun person. You want to be with the fun person. So a meme that's, funny, but also has that little red pill or that little bit of truth, somebody shares that on their Facebook, their Twitter, etc. People are going to ask about it or comment on it. It's going to generate conversation. Then people start posting articles, and it kind of solidifies your understanding of it and might share out from there.
And I mean, I'm sure you've seen, thousands of memes with all this work on both this website, but also the subreddit. I mean, what in your view makes a good meme?
Simplicity, first and foremost. Just a picture. We have a lot of, video memes and whatnot, and they're awesome. And the guys that make them are great. But I, like myself, if I'm looking for a meme or looking at a meme or just browsing the internet, I'm not going to stop and put headphones on and listen to a 2-minute video. But if you're like everyone else and you're just scrolling through your Facebook or scrolling through Reddit and clicking on a picture, you've got time to sink 4 seconds into reading a meme or however long it takes. So simplicity, just fun. If it makes you laugh, it's perfect. If it's, a little edgy and makes you think, it's perfect. Just humor, and not on an individual meme level, but if you have a topic like Epstein didn't kill himself that gets tons and tons and tons and tons of memes, people, casually browsing the internet keep running into the same idea over and over and over. Eventually, they might look into it. So simplicity, fun, and exposure.
Yeah, and I think you kind of mentioned it a few times, that the kind of meme goes first and the articles follow. Would you say that's an accurate strategy behind memes, is to kind of prime interest into reading more somewhere else?
Yeah, 100%.
So one of the criticisms that I was reading on the Donald subreddit, or something that was addressed in that, I think, FAQ post on the .win site, was that by taking the Donald off the Reddit platform, it wouldn't be able to red pill as effectively, and that was kind of shot down in the post. So how did these memes actually become visible outside of, for example, .win?
Yeah, Reddit is full of just far left communists. So trying to red pill on people on Reddit is kind of pointless. But there was a study a year or so back on memes that influenced the 2016 election, and they went through every website, every source, the creation of the memes, the distribution of the memes. 4chan was the most popular meme creation. That's why I say earlier that we were kind of 4chan light. We filtered things out to the normies. But The focus of the study was how the memes got to people, and by and large, the most massive distribution center on the entire internet was the Donald, and those memes were showing up on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, with an emphasis on Facebook because I believe, I don't have a doctorate in this, but I believe they're more effective when they're coming from somebody that you know rather than an anonymous person, and a lot more likely to engage, conversation about it, which goes back into the articles issue. So having fun, entertaining content that's easily distributable is a lot more important than being on a dystopian platform.
Mm-hmm. Just a kind of curious question I noticed is just browsing around .win that on one of the sidebars is a link to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. I was curious what that's about.
I'm pretty sure we did that around the time that Trump won the election. Entirely as a joke, but kind of as a reference to the fact that people on the left tend to be a little more unhinged and more likely to do something like actually try to kill themselves, but not really kill themselves, just try for the attention because of the results of a presidential election. So we just kind of thought it'd be amusing to help out anybody that came over to troll and got a little too triggered and needed someone to call.
Gotcha. So just a couple last questions for you about kind of moving forward. And one is looking at, we're going into the last year of an election cycle in 2020. Is there anything new in terms of the strategy, whether in the subreddit or on .win? Is there anything that's kind of, is it repeating the same playbook from 2016, or are there new formats, new strategies, whether it's red pilling or supporting the president? I mean, how do you see this election cycle versus the last one?
That is a really good question. I wish we were more organized, to be honest. I guess people think that we have more of an overarching idea of what's going on than we do. But I would say, for the most part, we're going to go about things the same just because we have our place. The campaign's there for boots on the ground and, actually important stuff. We're here just to kind of handle the internet side of things, which makes it sound like we're with the campaign. We're not. So, yeah, I would say that we would ultimately try to emulate 2016 because that seems to have worked.
And I think from some of the other interviews we've done on the show, people have mentioned that, especially with the CNN GIF that I think the president retweeted at some point, that kind of really spurred on more meme making. I mean, do you think that's a kind of concerted effort to try to get more memes tweeted by the president or people that are kind of high profile in Washington?
I would like to believe that somewhere in the Oval Office, Trump just takes 10 minutes of his day, checks the Donald and gets a laugh out of something enough that he tweets it. But they've seen the numbers. They know how effective what we do is. So it would not at all surprise me if that's exactly what they're doing, is just trying to grab that share of the market, which, in my opinion, could be a double-edged sword, because one of our biggest uses is that we are not tied to the campaign, so we can say and do and things and make memes that, might actually get the president in trouble if he said it. Mm-hmm. And that's why I've always, been against the idea of taking any kind of money or of getting directly involved with the campaign, because that would be its own form of censorship. And we've seen, we didn't really see with Warren because her memes didn't exist, but folks like TPUSA, Turning Point USA, that's a big money kind of Washington ordeal, and they've tried their hand with a think tank, I'm sure, of making memes, and they just kind of became the laughingstock of both the left and the right. I've seen more anti-Turning Point USA memes than pro-Turning Point USA memes, aside from the ones that they used to steal from the Donald and watermark and claim as theirs. That's another story. But yeah, I could see them getting into what I believe the CIA calls mimetic warfare. I just don't know if it's a good idea.
And so my last question has to do, I mean, it feels like so many of the members of the Donald, but also kind of just the quote unquote Trump base are brought in by the personality of the president himself. And so I'm curious to get your thoughts on, do you think that after his presidency, whether that's in 2020 or 2024, that these communities can kind of still be sustained?
I think that's the question that scares actual conservatives more than anything is if the fire that Trump lit under a lot of people's butts will stay lit without his personality, because that is a big part of it. And I think about that question a lot, and I would like to believe so. It will require having someone step up and lead that, can be the head of that movement. But going back to Red Pill, there are so many people that are a lot more aware in Red Pill than they were just before Trump, that it would be a hard fire to put out unless somehow Jeb Bush takes the reins as the conservative leader, which I can't imagine happening. So yeah, I would say that the movement will evolve beyond Trump.
And do you think it?
And I hope it might.
I'm just thinking of a follow-up, which is, do you think? I mean, it seems at least this kind of pro-Trump phenomenon has been very linked to these anonymous kind of simple image boards, whether it's 4chan or the Donald. I mean, do you think there's something about those sites that makes them where this meme making activity happens? Can you imagine it evolving to some other platform other than, I mean, the Donald and 4chan, 8chan, they're all kind of similar in their design.
I remember reading somewhere, and I can't quote it accurately, that any unmoderated forum on the internet will become vastly right-wing. And, is that because it's the truth? Who's to say? But I think that's why you see the content that you see coming from where it is. And it will be branded more toward the right because the right is not as concerned with offending people and worrying that you might trigger someone's 86 genders. So you won't see it not anonymous because you don't want to lose your job for posting a meme. So to say that you'll get good content out of something that's not anonymous and or is censored, like what's been happening to the Donald lately, I don't see happening. I think you require both of those attributes.
Well, Steve, this has been a super interesting conversation. Thanks for taking the time out and speaking with us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Social Media and Politics podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Next time, I'll be joined by Dr. Anna Maria Duchek-Segiston for the 4th annual Social Media and Politics Year in Review. We're hoping to incorporate more of your questions into a Facebook live stream on December 15th. For more information on that, there'll be an event on the Facebook page, Social Media and Politics Podcast. Until then, I'm your host, Michael Becerra, signing off from Malmo. See you next time.